The Avengers, Season 4 Review. Hello and welcome to my review of Season 4 of The Avengers, the cult classic 60s spy/genre show that ran for 6 seasons in the 1960s and a subsequent further 2 seasons in the mid to late 70s, then rebranded as The New Avengers. The one thing that the series always had at its core, of course, was the wonderful Patrick Macnee as John Steed, the dapper British secret agent with a sense of style, a gentlemanly panache, and a core of steel. Now, it might seem a bit odd starting an Avengers review with the 4th season, but I think most people who are familiar with the show will probably understand why. The Avengers is one of those shows that changed considerably as it went on. The first season, apart from the fact that it's completely missing, apart from maybe 2 or 3 episodes, was very, very different from the show that it later became, and which it is now kind of remembered as, and was basically a kind of a gritty sort of realistic spy series. As the series went on, it became slightly more quirkier, but the quirk really didn't come into massive force until the 4th season. The other thing that the 4th season introduced, of course, was Diana Rigg as the iconic Mrs. Emma Peel. And it's also the first season of the show that was filmed on film rather than videotape, giving the series from this point a much more expensive and glossy feel to it. I have to be honest, I'm not a big fan of the first few seasons of The Avengers. I mean, the first season, like I said, most of it isn't even there. Seasons 2 and 3, I don't know. I've never been overly taken with Honor Blackman's Kathy Gale, and I just find those seasons kind of dull. I know that probably won't be a very popular opinion with some people, but I've never been able to sit through more than a few episodes of them. The Avengers I like pretty much starts with Season 4, so that's the season I'm going to review. Now, the first episode of Season 4 is The Town of No Return. Now, the interesting thing for me, anyway, about this episode is that it was only the second episode of The Avengers that I ever saw, and it was kind of the beginning of my Avengers fandom. The first episode of The Avengers that I ever saw was the Wacky Races one from Season 5. I can't remember the title offhand. I saw that at a Doctor Who fan club about 1993, and I liked it, I enjoyed it, but that was basically it, because at that point there was no way to access that stuff. They didn't show any more, and I didn't really know anybody at that club like I had at the Sci-Fi Club in the UK with that guy who gave me scores of old Doctor Who stories. I didn't really know anybody enough to be hitting them up for Avengers episodes. So that was that. So I kind of forgot about it, though I did remember that I liked that episode. And then it was like 3 years later, it was like mid-1996, and I happened to be scouring through my local video shop, remember those? And they had videotapes of the Avengers, the VHS releases. They paired Season 4 and Season 5 episodes. They had a black and white episode paired with a colour episode from Season 5. And the very first one that I got out had The Town of No Return, followed by the Season 5 premiere, From Venus with Love, that's what it's called. And the Town of No Return came first, so that was basically only the second episode of The Avengers that I saw, and I liked it enough, probably more than the second one, although I like the second one. That's really kind of what started me off collecting renting the VHS tapes, and although I did buy a couple of them when I could. Of course, doing the videotapes was a very kind of incoherent way of doing it, apart from the fact that they were random season pairings. They didn't do them all, and I only had a handful of them. I only had like 2 episodes from Season 6, from the Tara season. I think there was Game and They Keep Killing Steed. I don't know if that was the only one they ever released, but it was the only one I ever managed to get my hands on. And for a very long time, I did not see season 6, and I didn't see about half of season 4. The only season of the Avengers that I saw in full for a long time was season 5, which was released on DVD in the early 2000s. It took until sometime in the 2010s for the DVD remastered version of season 4 and season 6 to get released, and of course I bought them, and of course I rebought season 5 as well at the time because it had been remastered and looked a hell of a lot better than the original DVD release. But yeah, that's how I started on the Avengers. Now, to get to the Town of No Return, it's a pretty good episode to start with. It's this strange town with an ever-shrinking population, many of whom appear to be imposters and not who they say they are. It's a really good episode. It's a really atmospheric episode. And I mean, even for being like a black and white episode, which can put some people off, I would still say that it's a very kind of good introduction to the show. Steed and Emma are both presented really well and really strong. And like I said, it's a really atmospheric and really kind of creepy kind of story, and it's really, really fun. Probably still one of my favourite episodes of The Avengers, in fact, and certainly one of my favourite episodes of Season 4. Now, I don't think I'm going to review every episode of Season 4 like I have with some shows in the past, simply because there are some episodes that there's not really that much to say about. It's not that they're particularly bad, it's just that they're just kind of ordinary. Now, the next episode that I want to talk about is the Cybernauts. This is obviously a fairly famous episode. The Cybernauts, basically these humanoid androids, killer robots basically, are one of the most famous Avengers creations. They're pretty much the only ones, the only thing that ever actually came back. They come back in a Season 5 episode, and they even come back in a New Avengers episode. And it's easy to see why they made such an impression. Again, the Cybernauts is a really strong episode. It's the show really heading into science fiction territory, which they start to do kind of more and more from this point. And it's also got the great Michael Gough as the bad guy, the mad scientist who starts it all off. What more is there to say? It's another strong, creepy, engaging episode. The next episode I want to talk about is another of my favourites from the season, and that's The Hour That Never Was, where on their way to a reunion for Steed at a military base, Steed and Emma have a car crash, which they wake up from to find that everybody at the base has apparently disappeared and time seems to have stopped. Now, this is a really good episode. It's another really atmospheric episode. It's another one where you kind of kept guessing as to what is going on. They even play with the audience's expectations in the sense of the strangeness of the setup with the car crash and them being knocked out and waking up. You almost kind of suspect that it's all going to turn out to be like a dream or a nightmare or something. And they actually play on that expectation during the episode. Steve actually wakes up back in the car, apparently after the car crash at one point, and seems to be being led to believe that everything he experienced up to that point was just a dream or a nightmare. But there's more to it than just that. This is a really strong, really clever episode, and is another of my favourites. Another notable episode, I'm not sure it's really one of my favourites, but it's notable, is The Man-Eater of Surrey Green. This is another very science fiction episode about basically a killer plant from outer space. It's written by Robert Banks Stewart, who would return to this idea probably more successfully, I would say, later on with the Tom Baker Doctor Who story, The Seeds of Doom, of course. And there are some definite clear echoes of the Man-Eater of Surrey Green in The Seeds of Doom, which makes it pretty interesting. Though, yeah, I don't think it's fantastic. It's okay. The Seeds of Doom does do it better, but it is very interesting for those reasons. Another of my favourite episodes from Season 4 is the one time the Avengers did what you could almost call a Christmas special. It's not, but you could certainly use it as that, and that's the episode called Too Many Christmas Trees. this is a really interesting episode. It's got a really great, creepy kind of atmosphere. Steve is having like nightmares and is kind of under the weather, and they start to kind of realize that he's actually under some form of psychic telepathic attack, and it's got something to do with this place that they've been invited and this for a Christmas party and the person who's invited them there. And there's a very kind of Dickensian atmosphere to the mansion that the party is being held in. This is another really great episode. Again, it's kind of veering into genre territory with, psychic powers being genuinely real in the Avengers universe. And it's a pretty creepy story. It's definitely one to put on late on Christmas Eve or Christmas night. Another really good and really famous episode is A Touch of Brimstone, which stars Peter Wyngarde as the villain, the rakish kind of head of the Hellfire Club, this revival of an old Victorian club of supposedly practical jokers living a hedonistic lifestyle, but their practical jokes have a very sinister kind of undertone, and there's a deeper agenda going on than what it might seem on the surface. This was quite a controversial episode in the day because it's a little bit raunchier than the norm for 60s television. I mean, it's pretty tame by today's standards, but it certainly raised a few eyebrows at the time. Diana Rigg in her Hellfire Brimstone costume is certainly something to behold. And Peter Wyngarde is great as the rakish villain, and again, this is a really strong episode. Another of my favourites, and another fairly famous episode from Season 4, is The House That Jack Built, in which Emma apparently inherits an old mansion from a late uncle, gets there only to find herself caught in a trap set by an old enemy, with the house being a kind of elaborate maze where the rooms move and the walls change and everything is leading her towards ultimately death at the centre of the house. This is another really memorable episode. It's a great episode for Diana Rigg, who basically takes the lead for the majority of the story. And again, it's a really strong episode. So that's my favourite episodes from Season 4. Now, again, I don't think that there's actually really any bad episodes in this season. Most of them are perfectly watchable and perfectly entertaining. It's just that those are the episodes that really stand out for me as being my favourites. Not just of the season, but probably ones I would put in my top 10 or top 20 overall episodes of the show. I like Season 4. It's not my favourite Avengers season. I far prefer Season 5. I actually probably controversially prefer Season 6 as well. I'll probably get to this in time. I know that some people don't like Season 6, and especially, they're not keen on Tara instead of Emma. I like Tara. I mean, yes, I prefer Emma, but I like Tara, and I just kind of think that Season 6 has more variance in the plots. Some of the episodes in Season 4, even though they're not bad, they can be a bit samey in their overall structure and the general nature of some of the plots. Whereas Season 6, they're kind of getting pretty wild with a lot of the ideas, and I like that. You know me, I like it when things get weird and wild and wacky, and Season 6 certainly does that. But I still like Season 4, and I would give it a strong B+.